Morning, everybody. Well, I'm going to get started. It is the first CalPADS network meeting of the year for LACOE. I kind of feel like that's not 100% accurate because we did have our first statewide CalPADS series meeting here at LACOE in person. I know some of you joined us in person, and I hope that was great. I'll talk a little bit more about the next two meetings of that and some other things coming up, but let's get started. Just a little housekeeping, if you could, in your rename yourself, make sure you have your LEA name. Just makes it easier if there's any questions that pop up. And we can always circle back to folks if there are questions, so we don't necessarily have to go digging through the OMS to find your district. If you have any questions, just please post them in the chat. It's a small group here, though, so we do allow you, if you want to come off mute and ask a question, just raise your hand. That's all we ask. If there are any questions we can't answer, we'll definitely follow up. We always send a follow-up anyway with the recording link, but if we have unanswered questions or we may have to seek out some expertise, we will make sure that that's included in the next meeting. Sean was going to join us originally, but then she had a meeting conflict. So I don't doubt that there will be questions that I won't be able to answer. But we will record it. Like I said, we'll get back to you, and the recording will be uploaded, linked in the agenda, and sent to you later. So here's my team. They're all here with me right now. I'm Evan Bartelheim. I didn't mention that up front. I'm the project director for accountability and data literacy here at LACOE. We're part of the Accountability Support and Monitoring Unit, their division. I'm joined by Dr. Hillary Weissman and Karina, Roy, and Jeremy, my expert team. We are small, but efficient, I like to think, right? So, but it's always good to have a team behind me, if for no other reason than the moral support. And we did have a great Halloween costume this year. We were data delinquents, so we were the rebel data people, so it was kind of fun. So let's find out who's in the Zoom with us. I know a lot of you, I recognize a few names, but there are a lot of unknown names. If you can, just indicate in the chat, how many years have you had a CalPADS login? It's one of those things I realized after the fact. I could have had a great fall picture of a log, but I didn't get it. But how long have you had a login? So you may not have been the CalPADS person, but you had a login for other purposes. You might have had just a limited view. All right. You may not even have a login. Okay. Well, Rebecca, 16 years. Holy cow. That's pretty much from the very beginning, isn't it? Yeah, Wendy, you were on, I know you were on the beta team, you and Rebecca both, right? Since it was CSIS, all right. Well, we have a pretty broad range. I like it, the fact that we've got, and then there's Jaime. He was one of us, and then he jumped right in to the mix over at Montebello, but he's still standing. Jonathan, yeah, 5 months. So we have some newbies, which is great, and we welcome you. We hopefully you'll be able to join us for one of our upcoming in-person sessions with CSIS and the CDE are putting on. We're hosting, but appreciate it. Okay, kind of a follow along to that. In the chat, because this is where we'll find out who are the best resources out there. They don't even have to be in our CalPADS network, but who can you thank for the best CalPADS tip or hack that you've ever learned, right? Maybe it's somebody from CSIS, maybe it's somebody from CD, but maybe it's somebody from here or your predecessor. Who did you learn your best tip or hack from? I don't see him here today, but my former CalPADS guy, Derek Abrego, he was my go-to with the tips. Oh, Brandy, of course, yeah. Martha, yeah, of course. Yeah, Brandy's always been a good source. I tell you, even now, she was like the encyclopedia. She was like an AI almost. She still knows all. Yeah, Nate and Alex. Yeah, if you haven't joined, if you're relatively new, if you're deep in the weeds, you definitely should join the CSIS Wednesdays meetings. If you're not, if you're relatively new, it might kind of be a little bit overwhelming because they do get into some weedy stuff. I listen, and I can take it about every third question. Sometimes it just gets two in there. All right, look at Rebecca. You just got the whole team down. You probably have them on short on your short list, right? Lisa Hayes. I don't know Lisa, Danny. Wonder if she's a district person. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I think we should be always grateful for those folks who provide us supports. And this meeting is largely going to be emphasizing some of that we takes a village, which you hear a lot. But let's say, so here's what we'll go through today. I'm going to do our introduction, which we kind of just did, and the meeting announcements, just some upcoming meetings I want to make sure you have dialed in. Talk a little bit about accountability in the dashboard, specifically, hopefully as it relates to CalPADS. There's some general updates to some recent notes or notifications that have popped up, and I've kind of tried to monitor the CSIS user group, so things pop up there periodically, and some other meetings. We had a CalPADS county office meeting recently. Then some recent CalPADS flashes kind of interwoven in there. A lot have come out since the last the quarterly meeting, the regional meeting. And then I want to kind of review, and the purposes of talking Fall 1, I'm going to share some of the resources that were shared in our training. If you weren't able to join us, they're available to you. And I just thought I'd kind of give you a quick overview of those, and because I think you can still leverage those materials even if you weren't able to join us. And then we only have one vendor, I think, today, PowerSchool. Is that right, Karina? Yep. So Aries, of course, has AriesCon going on, I think, right now. So that's maybe why we just tried to move the dates around, and you never can find just the perfect date. But here's just the purpose of our meetings are always just to share timely information as things come up, anything that we come across. We do provide feedback to the CDE, and I've got a poll coming up in a few minutes that I'd love to have your feedback on. We want to build the understanding of CalPADS impact and reach. And that's really kind of where our sweet spot is, trying to reach people outside of the CalPADS world, people who aren't necessarily CalPADS coordinators who are doing the day-to-day work, but rather people you need for support. And because it can be intimidating when you start hearing the CalPADian language being spoken. And then if you're brand new to CalPADS, providing resources that may help you get your job done, and ideally to foster some of the networking as a network, and then to share any resources that we come across. We have some good ones to share today. Our Canvas CalPADS page has been updated. Thank you, Karina. It's nice and sharp looking. For today, I'm going to quick jump over there just so you can see what we have in there for now. And let me go. So here's our landing page. Whenever you land here, this is my view, of course, but if you go to the modules feature, you'll see we've got any number of resources that are available. We'll talk about them. They're all loaded there as well. And then on the agenda page, we have everything linked, including the slides for today. Those are also in the modules. The link for the Zoom vendor for for today, and then just kind of a breakdown. Everything we'll talk about. We've got links here. Some things we won't talk about if they're references, including some general resources that we just like to drop in, including this CalPADS acronyms and glossary. If you're a brand new user to CalPADS, make sure you bookmark that, because you'll maybe hear things not necessarily here. I try to keep it real with the less CalPADian language, but you may hear it elsewhere and go, what are they even talking about? So, and let me get back here. All right. So if you do need technical support, that's not what we provide. I try, but honestly, the go-to sources, which everybody listed here, the CalPADS Q&A, which is a CSIS meeting once a week, is amazing. Of course, CalPADS quarterly regional meetings, and the CalPADS flash page, the LEA listserv, if you don't belong to all these, and then the CSIS training page, and the YouTube training channel for CSIS. That's where you get your access. Roberto, I'm going to share a link here. There's actually a link in the Canvas page to get to the Q&A. It's just a live link every day, every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. You just click that link and join in. Easy to get to. And so our meetings, there's a little confusion, my fault. I think two things. One, we after we put out our initial list of meetings, then we added these new meetings in conjunction with CSIS, CDE, California County Superintendent's Office, and Fresno County, and then that was kind of overkill. So we cut back. We dropped one meeting out of our. Oops, I seem to be frozen. Am I back? Okay, sorry, froze there for a second. So we dropped one meeting for the year, and then we realized we had some conflicts with some of the CDE meetings, and so thanks, Roy. So we rescheduled, and then when I put out the Zoom invite, it had some crazy dates on there. So ignore those dates. These are the dates. Today, November 5th, is our first meeting. Then we'll meet again on January 21st. And then our final meeting on April 22nd. So if you're already a member, you're automatically registered. You don't have to re-register. But if you find somebody who you think would benefit, it doesn't have to be a CalPADS person, but somebody you think would be benefit in knowing more about CalPADS. Like I said, I try to keep it real. Don't make it too CalPADian. Then send them our way by sharing this link with them. So these are the two series, the series I was talking about, the CalPADS Statewide Leadership Series. I think this was a huge success. We filled a room, it's in person. We filled a room across from us, our main building, and we have two more coming up. The December 9th meeting is almost full. We're like close to capacity, but there are still a few more spots. And I will say, caveat up front, this is not really designed specifically for CalPADS coordinators. This is designed for people, administrators who are new to CalPADS or need to know more. But CalPADS administrators, if you're in the weeds, it's fine. We encourage you to come too, but bring a friend. Don't miss the opportunity to bring someone from your team to help expand their understanding. So the December 9th meeting, there are still a few spaces available. These flyers are in Canvas, and the registration link, which will take you to the Fresno OMS registration page, because they're kind of the main delivery. We're just the host. You can go there. If there's overfill, they do have a wait. They will establish a wait list, and we had a few people drop off last time. So, but the upcoming meeting will be primarily looking back at Fall 1, which was the contents of their first meeting, which we'll touch base with later, and then Fall 2 prep. So big one for Fall 2 prep. So maybe you want to bring your HR credential analyst from your district. Those would be two good ones for the Fall 2. And then the April 1st, this is preparing for the dashboard. This would be a good one for, so many folks, right? Your counselors, your any LEA administrator, your superintendent, assistant superintendent, those would all be good too. And if you are unable to attend here in person, bear in mind that this is being simulcast to Orange County and Ventura County. There are other county offices that are doing it. You still have to go live. There's no live broadcast. You can't zoom in, because they wanted to be hands-on. They wanted to develop some of the activities. Anyway, this is a great opportunity. The link for the spring, this is the first time anybody's been seeing it. So don't get shut out. Get in there. I think the end of year will be the biggest. And I don't know, maybe we can find, the way to register, load or go to Canvas, open the flyer, and you'll find the link where it says register here. I guess we could have had maybe Karina. There you go. Thank you, Karina. Thank you for doing that. So the link to direct register is there. It's a great series. Multiple partners on this. So California superintendents, CSIS, CDE are all there. They all have a component to being here. And then Fresno County, though, our friend Rebecca Aguilar, who has probably provided more accessible resources for CalPADS than anybody in the state, I think, in terms of kind of practical how to use this if you're not necessarily a CalPADS pro. She makes great stuff, and she's very accessible. She was a counselor herself, and she became a CalPADS coordinator, and so she has a unique perspective and really can deliver a accessible presentation on the topic. So the other meetings, here they are. weekly CalPADS Q&A, Roberto, that we were talking about. That's every Wednesday, 3 to 4 p.m. They'll let you know if there's a conflict with a holiday or something. And then if you don't catch those, they all actually record all of them, and then they have the time-stamped recordings. And sometimes it's just good to go back a few weeks if there's something that's been like troubling you, just to go back and look through the time steps on the most recent ones and see if it's been a question that's been asked before, and you can bring up a link right to the point in the YouTube recording. Good stuff. The CDE Special Education Data Office Hours, there's a Zoom registration for those dates, and that if you want to see Brandy, got to go to those meetings. And then the CalPADS regional update meetings, I'm sure you saw they scheduled the final 2. So they're, you can attend the regional. We're supposed to be in Southern Region A, but you can attend any of the meetings that really fit your schedule. So March 25th and 26th, they have the 5 meetings over the course of 2 days, and then May 20th and 21st. 25th and 26th is a focus on the end of year submission, and 20th and 21st will probably be revisiting some of the end of the year, but also be looking a year forward and the changes to expect in the 25-26 school year. And there's a separate, they're on the same page, but the separate registration for both. So you have to register for those separately, but I would get in there and put it on your list. So let me take a sip. A lot of talking in this meeting. So accountability and the dashboard. This is exciting year. I don't know. We like the dashboard. Going back to 2017, that's when the dashboard first made its appearance, and it's been constantly evolving. And then, of course, for a couple of years where there was no accountability, we had no dashboard, right? And then some of the indicators have come on and changed. And so we didn't have a color for the college career indicator last year because the students who graduated when they were in 11th grade would have taken the CASP. There was no testing, so it took a year, but it's finally back in full color. We have all our indicators in full color, so they're showing both status and change, and all those will be used for accountability purposes, for identifying both districts and schools for any additional supports that may be needed. And of course, CalPADS plays a huge role in the dashboard. So one of the things that I'm sure everybody's aware of is that, this year it's earlier, December 1st, and we may even see it sooner than that. I know that the people at CDE would like to go away for Thanksgiving break and not have the dashboard hanging over their head, but they're legally obliged to get it out by December 1st. It may be out sooner, and districts will receive a private preview. And some folks here, I'm not sure, the private preview will be sent to dashboard coordinators and superintendents. But when it's out, and there may be questions that arise, like, does this look right to you? Because invariably, a lot of the numbers may look skewed. What especially happens, I think, is when folks, and this happened to me, when I was getting an indicator for suspension or chronic absenteeism, and I saw, wait a minute, do we have that many foster youth? It's like double what I expected, right? Well, it's understanding the cumulative enrollment and what those numbers look like the prior year. That may escape people because it's not your census day enrollment for some of the indicators. It's your cumulative enrollment for the year. But moving forward past this year, this will continue to move up. November 15th in 2025, then October 15th in 2026. Sorry, that's a typo there. So that'll eventually coincide with the release of the CASP and LPAC data. So that's kind of going to be a ton of data dropping all at once. And of course, these changes, how do they affect you? They change the end of year submission deadline and the end of year submission cycle. And so, this flyer that I have uploaded here, it's uploaded in Canvas, does talk about how that'll change and the expectations. And hopefully there's been some talk at your LEA about the additional support that's needed to get things done on time. But it is going to put an extra pressure on CalPADS folks for the end of year submission cycle. One thing that did come out, and this was in Flash 290, was that they've decoupled that end of year 3 1-year grad rate submission from the summer grad deadline. So that still remains, the summer grad deadline will still remain August 15th. So those two are the ACGR poll will still be separated. So that was a concern, that those two would actually not catch up with one another, that there'd still be we would be able to capture our summer grads, but that should no longer be a concern. And for those of you who just joined us, we'll drop the links in again. We are recording, so I know if you made it a little bit late, just don't worry. We'll have anything you might have missed will be available in the recording. A couple exciting things. So one group that's being added this year, as I probably have mentioned before, is long-term English learners. They are the 14th student group that's being added across all state indicators. And they actually will be able to get both, they go back and capture their progress from the previous years. So they actually will have colors for them as well, even though they're just being identified, they're able to go back and calculate status from the prior year and change as well. So long-term English learners will receive full colors across all of the state indicators. They were added via State Senate Bill 141. It's the first new student group to be added in a while, and since 2017. And they actually have the same numbers for the same requirements and values as foster youth and homeless students do at the district level, which is you only need 15 or more to receive a color for students. For long-term English learners. At a school level, including charter schools, you need 30 or more. So, depending on where you are, this may reflect a fairly large student group. The big shift here, and I know we've had English learner data provided before, and you as the CALPADS people frequently, I think, have been the recipient of the data releases, the LTEL and at risk of LTEL data releases. I think you're usually on that release information that comes out in late spring. On Jeanette, they'll have colors for everything. So the definition for accountability, this is a unique definition, unique from the existing definition, which includes a bunch of information in addition to the grade level. They have the new definition from Ed Code 52052 is just any pupil who has not attained English language fluency, proficiency within 7 years of their initial classification as an English learner. What this means in practice, and you may have heard this elsewhere, is that the CDE, and this is not a change in practice, this is how they've done it with the prior LTEL definition, is they actually look to which is earlier, the initial US school enrollment date or the ELAS start date. And you can see where, the majority of times you're going to have that initial US school enrollment date first, student enrolls, then you test them. But if you're coming from a district that practices summer testing and you get that preliminary enrollment, you get the SSID, you test them before school actually starts, you can see how that can be reversed, right? So it could lead to some weird stuff, and the CDE shared with us some weird things where a student actually was initially enrolled in a US school, but not here in California, right? They were initially enrolled elsewhere, and so they show up to us, and we give them an initial LPAC, and they're identified, sixth graders as an English learner, even though they had a US school enrollment date, 5 years earlier. They'll still look back to that initial US school enrollment date, even though they didn't get to us until many years later. That student's going to be treated as a long-term English learner. And so those are the things you can be aware of. There will be some changes. I think this came up in our last meeting, or at least it was shared at the regional meeting. The CDE is adding some columns. They're updating the report. Some of the following reports will be 15.1 and 15.2 will be updated to include a count of long-term English learners, which should certainly make it a lot more helpful for you to understand who these students are. And you can also just run, you'll be able to run a report to see who these students are based on those initial enrollment dates. And these are like year to year. There's actually, I should have written it down. I will add it afterwards, a specific number of days from that, whichever comes first. So let's say the ELAS date, they have a specific number of days after which that student would be identified as a long-term English learner for the year. So if the student was initially identified, say, on August 25th, and then I want to say it's 2,567 days. I don't know why that number sticks in my head. 2,567 days here, that's calendar year, 7 years. That student then has not been reclassified yet. That student then becomes an LTEL on the dashboard, and that student will be an LTEL even if they're reclassified the very next day for the purposes of any of the indicators that are collected that year. And if they're in high school, then they're in the cohort for that as an LTEL. So important stuff to know, and you may definitely be called upon to run some reports to help us sort out. You may have already tried to do this. It's gotten a little clearer though since the notification, since the clarification on how it's being determined. Science, we're excited about this. We're actually doing a presentation. Science is on the dashboard. It's going to be an indicator that reflects the student performance on the CAST, the California Science Test, as well as the California Alternate Science Test. And this is given to students in grades 5, 8, and in high school, at any grade in high school. Important for CalPADS people to know about this, because I think that what the state is seeing, so the initial year, there will be no colors this initial year. This is largely, it's going to appear as a colorless, I guess it's not colorless, it has purple and teal, but it won't have any performance colors for 2024. It will show your status, it will show the change from the prior year, and there is a participation rate being calculated, but it won't be in effect until the 2025 dashboard, and there'll be a penalty. So the biggest challenge, I think, is for our high school students. About 50% of our high schools were able to reach the 95% participation rate. And so it's going to be key, I think, for CalPADS folks to make sure that enrollment data is accurate, because there will be rules that are applied, right? But if a student has left your district, and we want to make sure they're gone before the window opens this spring, because the 2025 administration will be subject to that participation rate penalty. So you'll hear more about it from your assessment folks coming up, but we definitely have an issue with participation rate in science for high schools. And it's been a challenge because districts have the option of testing in grades 10, 11, or 12. And so figuring out the right grade to test them, 10 is maybe too early. 11, they're overwhelmed because they're taking all the other tests, ELA, math. My daughters are seniors now, so last year they got hammered. But by 12th grade, good luck, right? Tracking them down. They may not want to be there to test. So there's going to be a big push, I think, this year. And that's the gist of our presentation we're going to give on Thursday up at the CERA conference. It's just how you can use your data to help track down those students. A couple resources, these are linked in Canvas, but the 2024 Connecting CalPADS to the Dashboard Handbook is going to be helpful for you. People are coming to you saying, how was this? Do you know where this data came from? A lot of the dashboard is driven by CalPADS data and their reports that you can go back. A lot of the data can be looked at prior to the dashboard release. It should not be looked at as a black box where you submit your end of year data and then 4 months later it pops up. You can actually follow the guidance in this dashboard handbook to actually calculate suspension rate, your chronic absenteeism. Obviously the CASP, ELA, and math, those have to be, come from ETS and TOMS, but this is helpful. There's also a dashboard technical guide, which will be helpful if you're called upon for that. That hasn't been released yet, but there's a link in there that'll take you to that. So here's what I wanted to get your feedback on. So as we've talked about before in here, Senate Bill 114 established this new differentiated assistance eligibility. And it's kind of the term differentiated assistance or technical assistance gets used interchangeably. And so the new role, and this will be released, a list of LEAs that are eligible will be released in conjunction with the release of this upcoming dashboard on December 1st. Unfortunately, nobody here in LA County is eligible on this go round, but any district that fails to submit data according to the processes and timelines as specified in Ed Code 6900 could be subject to this technical assistance. And I don't want to say it's a bad thing, because it's really just support. And anybody who's been involved as a district with us with differentiated assistance, it's not painful. It's just us, and we're there to be your thought partner. So it's actually can be kind of a helpful thing for most people. Also, CalPADS statute states that local education agencies shall submit data according to processes and timelines established by the department, right? So this leaves a little room for interpretation. What are those processes and timelines? And this includes submitting and certifying accurate, correct, and complete data by each certification deadline. And so it's moved from just, did you get your data certified on time, to maybe there's a little more at play here. And this is a conversation, by the way. This is not a done deal. But you may have noticed in the submission deadlines that came out, this was in Flash 290. It was also in the superintendent, letter to superintendents that came out in just a few weeks ago. But you notice this column, recommended date for no fatal errors, right? So I kind of put a pin in that because I think this is maybe one of those timelines or processes that the CDE is looking to say, not just certification, right? It has to be on time, but we want to see that you've cleared all your fatal errors by a specific time, right? So in this case, by November 22nd. And you'll note in those flashes, it was noted as a best practice, LEA should resolve all fatal errors by the specified date, and resolving all errors by the recommended date for no fatal errors ensures that LEA staff have adequate time to review error-free reports for accuracy, understandably. The question, though, and I'll just pull this up. We have a preview. We actually have 69 LEAs out of about 400 who've already certified. So awesome. Good for you if you're one of them. Pat yourself on the back. But clearly, this is still pretty early in the fall one cycle. And so we have a lot of LEAs that are, in the phase of building up, right? And so you do see a lot of fatal errors still in a lot of our LEAs. So just out of curiosity, so I want to run a quick poll here. And I'm not seeing the poll. Are you guys seeing the poll? Give me a thumbs up. Karina, do you see the poll? Okay. So my question to you, 3 questions to you, just to kind of get a sense of this. How likely are you to have 0 fatal errors by November 22nd? And just, what your impression is. How concerned are you about meeting the suggested no fatal errors deadline for fall 1? And which I guess those two go hand in hand. And then finally, this is just wondering what your thoughts are. Do you agree that failing to meet a milestone such as no fatal errors by a specific date should be grounds for identification for technical assistance? And I'm asking you these questions because, like I said, this is a conversation, and I know that the California County Superintendents has been in dialogue with CDE and CSIS over this, or what will be the grounds for identification for technical assistance. Now, based on the statute, the technical assistance is provided by county offices like us, and it may take the form of, an LEA, whether a charter school or a district, having to work with me, which, I don't think it would be so horrible, but, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but the degree to which, is it fair, and might there be reasons why there, are outstanding, you still have fatal errors as of a date if that's going to be used. And there are other factors that might be factored in, including, data as it appears. And we've had this in the past where data wasn't certified on time for fall 2, for example, and districts got penalized on the dashboard with a standard not met for local indicator 1, for example. And so I think we've stalled out, so I'm going to end the poll, and let me just share the results here. So sharing the results, this was an anonymous poll, by the way, so you have no fear. So how likely are you to be finished? Looks like we got about 40. I'm going to say a majority of folks are in the 4 to 5 very likely range to have 0 fatal errors by November 22nd. So that's great news, but that still leaves a fairly substantial chunk of folks who are not 100% sure, and definitely a few who think I'm probably going to have some fatal errors. So that's one. And then the concern certainly reflects that there's still some concern about the possibility. What I'm really interested in here is just the degree to which failing to meet a milestone should be considered. And it's actually pretty, I see it's a pretty widely split. So Rebecca, you're so bad. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that, we're trying to provide more support. And if there are clear indicators that we see repeatedly, like, if, where there's smoke, there's fire. So maybe, fatal errors. But, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the, Wendy, I think, available prior to the deadline would be helpful. But if you can inform me a little bit further. So I'm going to take some of these responses. I will share these with my boss. I just would love to know what other reasons, what people may encounter as far as a reason why you may not have your fatal errors cleared by that date. And known issues, obviously that's going to happen. And I don't think anybody would be held accountable for known issues. But yeah, there are fatal errors. And I'm just trying to think of the circumstances under which, okay, I've still got fatal errors. That's out of your control. Certainly the SPED department and getting for fall 1 and getting your special ed data cleared up. And that does present an interesting challenge. People quit. I know that's happened on a number of occasions, and people can leave at the most inopportune times. And I don't necessarily know that. I guess the one thing I would say in those situations, if somebody were to quit and that were the reason why, someone would be identified for technical assistance, at least whoever took over who is new would have additional support. So that's, the upside. But yeah, I think that there's continues to be this. Well, and I think I didn't ask it, but I certainly think that one of the ways that we would want to support the district would be in providing support for the special education data coordinators. A lot of new people. And I mean, I've seen this particular meeting, and I realized when I was getting ready for this meeting, I haven't reached out to everybody on the list. I mean, you folks know about it. I'd like to think that word gets out, but we need to do more outreach for more new people. I think we skew a little bit more veteran and a lot of people are probably out there struggling right now, and we should have them in this meeting. All right, some general updates. So you've all seen this. I think most assessment people have seen this, but I'm going to say that I'm kind of at the point where I never assume that everybody has seen this guidance or any guidance for that matter, because I'm always surprised by people, oh, I hadn't heard of that yet, right? And so it's like, sometimes it just does not penetrate. So you have this new guidance regarding TK and CALPADS, which was legislation passed this summer, which said transitional kindergarten students cannot be tested with the LPAC. You're going to identify that student as a TBD in their ELAS, and they will be tested upon becoming a kindergartner, right? So they're no longer going to be tested. There's just this 1 year. That does not mean they won't receive services from a district. It just means that they have a separate classification outside of CalPADS that these students are receiving. Our multilingual academic support unit has spoken about this, but you'll continue to collect the home language survey. It's just the one home language survey that stays on file. They don't need a new one when they enter kindergarten. But make sure you get this to your assessment coordinators. We try our best to get them. Additionally, there's related to assessment, and make sure your language, the assessment people learn that the language codes have been updated, and the ELAS, so students with the American Sign Language are to be considered English only, and students with any other sign language would be considered TBD and subject to an initial LPAC or initial alternate LPAC. So this one may not have gotten that widely spread, so make sure your assessment person, your LPAC specifically person, knows about this. This came out, this was actually referenced in the quarterly meeting. Then we heard about it again from Brandy in our county office meeting. So I'm going to make sure that it gets shared here. This is referenced in Flash 290 as well. But that for the 2024-25 academic year, the compliance improvement monitoring process, which looks at a bunch of data to determine if there's disproportionality of students who are identified for special education. They're going to be pulling data from earlier than they have in the past. So the data that's approved in fall 1, that initial certification deadline in December is going to be where they pull the data from for the DISPRO, as they like to say, data and the annual determinations, because they want to get the information out to eligible districts sooner. So what this means, and this is where, communication with your special education data system coordinators and your special ed directors is critical, is they need to have the plan record effective on census day. The student has both primary disability code and the special education program setting code in place. And then even more importantly, they need to be looking, in conjunction with you and any student information system coordinator, that there is an accurate capture of race and ethnicity data, because disproportionality is measured by a disproportionate number of students of a specific race or ethnicity being identified for special education. So all that needs to be in place for an accurate interpretation. So earlier date for that this year. Also, critical date, that December 13th, will be used for the LCFF, the unduplicated pupil count, which affects your supplemental concentration grant funding. This will be used for the first principal apportionment, or P1. And I can see Hillary lighting up because she's going through a CBO program right now. So this is good stuff. Make sure your CBO and your fiscal staff know this, right? And then that report certified at the amendment window deadline will be used for the second principal apportionment. After that's in, anything else would have to be rectified during the audit process, which is a much bigger pain. So good to know. This is a new thing. I'm sure you saw the things and you're like, what does this have to do with anything? The CCGI, and I'm telling you, I heard about this a couple of years ago because, of course, I'm all things dashboard. And our colleagues in Riverside County had a presenter from this California College Guidance Initiative. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. They work in coordination with the UCs and the Cal States to ensure that there's more accurate interpretation. So there were two, there was a letter and a memo that went out, and I've got those, the flashes and the superintendent letter are posted in Canvas. Basically, here's what's happening. New state law, Senate Bill 153, is requiring all public schools that offer grades 9 through 12 to enter into a data sharing agreement with the CCGI, this entity, this nonprofit entity out there. And then by June 30th of 2026, be able to provide these student transcript files according to the process and timelines established by CCGI. And there is a transcript, and I'll get that to you soon, a transcript format that's currently being developed by CDE and being shared with the student information system vendors. And then the state level, the CDE is required to provide this basic student enrollment data that is will allow for, that you're already submitting, to allow for these basic accounts. And by the way, as a person with 2 seniors, I can tell you, boy, I wish we had one of these partner accounts right now. And I'll tell you in a minute. So this is all then shared with the UC, CSU, and California community colleges. And here's where it benefits the kids. And this is what, to get right down to it, right? So you have these tools which students can use to determine their Cal State and UC eligibility and the progress they're making in real time, right? It's not I get to the end of my 4 years and I realize, oh, I didn't meet the criteria, and now I'm not eligible, or I have to make up a class. So you can see your progress you're tracking. You can also verify in real time that the A through G courses are officially approved A through G courses that are in the course management portal, which is the UC Cal State portal. And then you have access. This is where I'm like, oh man, and I won't say that I've been, but the Common App, the UC Apply, the Cal State Apply, they all ask you to self-report your grades, and it is this tedious task. If you have these set up, students will be able to push a button and basically import their grades into those systems with zero. It's going to be huge, and it'll be way more accurate, right? Because anytime you're self-reporting stuff, it's inaccurate, which can cause all sorts of problems. So this will be huge for kids. But here's the bonus for LEAs: the A through G data, which of course affects the College Career Indicator, is going to be a lot more accurate, right? And so there's probably a lot. I would say the experience, and I know some districts here have already partnered with CCGI, is that it increases your A through G rate because it more accurately captures all the folks who are not, they're in courses that are A through G approved. It's just not capturing them. And then it adds any dual enrollment courses that are on the portal. So these are all really helpful things that I'm excited about. like I said, make sure you share this though with your counselors and your accountability admin so you get the support you need, because this is going to be a little bit of a lift, but I definitely think the sooner a district can have, or a charter can have, partner counts, the better for everybody. So let me just take a quick swig of water. Thank you for giving me all your feedback too. I definitely will share this. So fall one, I was just in Boston 2 weeks ago. There's nothing like the Northeast for the fall colors either. And I didn't even get there in peak season, but it really puts you in the spirit. So I'm in the spirit for some fall colors, and even the Sierras, they'll get them. So as I mentioned, we have these 2 trainings, but the training that happened earlier in September, the resources, I've loaded them in Canvas for you. And even if you weren't at the meeting, and I know several of you were, and several of you, brought a lot of people with you, which I hope you found it helpful. The feedback that they shared was really good, that people really got a lot out of it. So I encourage you to attend the other ones. But it really, like I said earlier, it's designed for CALPADS, or for administrators who support CALPADS staff, not necessarily for the CALPADS staff themselves. You guys know this stuff. It's to kind of help leverage these other people who you need for support. And the emphasis throughout is placed on the why and the how of CALPADS, right? Not just here, and it's not super technical, but it does get into some technical aspects so people can understand it's not impossible, right? It does give you a how, and it identifies who should be part of that process, which is helpful for LEA administrators to hear. And there's a report review, there's a breakdown of all the reports, who should be looking at them. And it also gives tips on designing a process to be able to get through fall one effectively, efficiently, and accurately. So like I said, I added all the resources here. And the reason I think they're still helpful, even if you weren't able to attend, is because I think you can leverage some of these. If no other way, you can share and say, hey, look, all these people are saying you should be at these trainings or you should participate. And Rebecca, I know that that's probably, hard, but just like maybe you do not certify this year and then they have to go to the meetings next year, right? That's a possibility. So you want to share this with them. And I think it's really more accessible. If you take a look at it, if you weren't here, you might find that someone's like, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense, and breaks it down in a way. So I wanted to run through some of these, and they're also reminders, but this will give you a sense of what was in the training. So, here's part of the why. Why is fall one important, right? And you point out, you've got identification of your unduplicated pupil count for your LCFF. So money, right? Money talks. Everybody's going to be down with that, and that's both your CBOs and your Title I folks are going to want to know that. You've got your Title III LAP and Title III immigrant data is being submitted. All that comes with money, and then you've got the data also that that informs the SARC, your Title VI, Title IX reports for the civil rights collection, your IDEA data, and any data that gets reported on DataQuest, including your dropout data, right? So the importance of all this being shared accurately maybe resonates with people when they know, oh, okay, I have a reason to care about this because this would affect me. And then they have, and I'm kind of jumping through, there's more here, but just in terms, this is kind of shared up front, who should be involved at the different submissions. I think this is really helpful. So with our fall one, you should be seeing some school counselor involvement, your registrars, your principals, even definitely your EL services staff for identifying, students who are reclassified and making sure that the ELAS data is accurate. Your school lunch program folks, hopefully they've been involved with you, as well as your special education staff and your SELPA directors for hopefully that sign off. And just in terms of fall one for state and federal programs, this is specific to SFP folks. It gives you all your data as of Census Day. I don't know if any of you knew Bonnie McFarland, who used to be our state and federal program. She's retired now, but she's been updating some of the information our state and federal programs folks use. And so I definitely have been working with her, and a lot of this stuff is so relevant in terms of, which reports to run. And I'll show you in a minute, like where can we get this data, right? There's DataQuest data that's available for state and federal program people from the prior year, but you can use current year data using report 1.1. So here's the reports overview, what should be reviewed, and she gets into detail that I don't cover here, but just who should be involved, what reports you should look at, the sequence, who all should be taking a look at this stuff. the September meeting is linked in the Canvas page, FYI. So there's a link. The meeting wasn't recorded, as I said. You'll have the PowerPoint and then some resource guides, which should help you. Am I forgetting, Karina, was it October or September? Maybe mistakenly said it was September.
For the statewide?
Yeah.
It was September.
Okay, thank you. The FRPM data collection tool, I know I've shared this probably 3 times with you. I just think it's such a good guidance for what you need, especially the number of schools, provision 2 and 3 schools that we have. And I saw this just came up in the CSIS listserv. People were trying to share this. So it's a great tool that Rebecca Aguilar created, and it's linked in our Canvas page. But she goes over this, and she actually has an activity like, what should we use? You know, if we're provision 1 or 2, or provision 2 or 3 school, you know, can I use, at what point in the journey am I able to use alternate income forms, or at what point do I have to collect national school lunch program forms? So this is really helpful because it affects your LCFF and your Title I. Of course, much of that cake has already been baked for this year. If it wasn't already collected, right? You can't now, after the fact, go collect them after October 31st. But it certainly still will apply next year if your data is maybe slightly undercounted, how you could do a better job. LCFF report 1.17, it goes into detail about what you should be looking for. State and federal program directors, CBOs should be looking at this data. As I mentioned, report 1.1, you know, make sure your state and federal program folks are looking at this, and including things like, if I see zeros, some red flags to look for. And so, you know, if you go through this is the data that gets that populates the CONAP, which they call CARS. And so if the data is not accurate here, you can amend it later, but it's much easier if it's accurate going in. So that's why state and federal program people need to be strong-armed into participating with you, and what they should be looking for. And I think even if you weren't at the meeting, this will help. The initial U.S. school.
If I may?
Yeah, Leland.
Hey, a couple things. First of all, it's very good that you pointed to this 1.1 report. The schools who sometimes, you know, districts, LAs are closing the schools. Please make sure that you submit the petition to CDE that school is closed. Otherwise, if let's say you have 0 enrollment for the school, you would not be able to certify full submission or any other submissions. Again, this is just a small comment. If it's possible, I have another question for the prior part of your presentation. I sent a text message. Well, I sent it in chat. You mentioned that LA should share the data, you know, the graduation transcript data with state. But do you know if LA will be able to download it as well, or it will be just one-way street, or it's not decided yet?
No, the data is shared with the district. Actually, that was the presentation I heard for, you're talking about the CCGI data.
Yes. So, but can we download the batch, for example, on weekly basis? Can we download this data, you know, from the state website? So when students come to our court schools from anywhere in California, let's say, we would have the information, how, you know, what they have in their high school somewhere else. That's
a great question, Lena. It actually is really relevant to foster youth. I'll have to get more information about the plans, but I would imagine that's why they're standardizing the format, the transcript format, to make it accessible. But that would be one benefit, would be that if everybody has that standardized format now, the transcripts would be a lot more portable. But I'll find out more information.
Please let me know if you can. I appreciate it.
Okay, Lena. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And so U.S. enrollment date, just carry on report. These are all in here. Again, dive in and take a look at the reports that she covers. And then I think this is really important too, which is just how to develop a plan of attack, right? Who's going to take the lead? And this is just skimming over, but she has a lot of examples and a lot of resources that she's come up with in the past. You know, we've shared some of those here, which is identifying some timelines, and she has this timeline template that you could upload and use yourself, modify for your own purposes, and have a clear visual, like here's when we want to have this done, and share it with all the people who are participating. And it really makes it, it's for the clarity, because that's one of the biggest challenges is just organizing, letting people know what deadlines and when they need to have the stuff in. So these are all kind of laid out within her presentation. And I think you can gather a lot of what she drove at through that process, even though you weren't in the room. And I'm going to look back. I think she's delivered this in prior years, so there may be some recordings that she's shared in the past that are very similar and will be helpful. And I think I might have even shared those before. And so a couple last things before we break. I threw these in because this was in this meeting last week for the county offices. So I know the CDE felt they were important. Just a reminder that for uses other than LCFF, that the free and reduced price meal records 181 and 182 have to overlap census day to be counted, right? And so that's like Title I, even though you have up to October 31st, if they did not overlap, they have an impact on Title I allocation internally. That doesn't affect your overall allocation, but just in terms of ranking and serving students, they don't have the same criteria, a form that comes in after census day. Since 23-24 was the first year that TK and kindergarten were reported as separate grade levels, just take a close look at your TK and KN students, make sure they're reported correctly. And again, because of that change in state law around testing for the initial LPAC, if they were misidentified as TK and they did not test, they could be subject to some challenges with regards to Title III and EL program monitoring. So just be aware of that. It could cause additional work. It definitely could affect the dashboard. And I haven't seen, I have not been able to watch the chat. I will definitely take a look. Get more information about CCGI and how it can be used. I think it's going to be a huge improvement to kind of what's a kind of a messy program. That's what I've definitely gathered from Riverside County. MJ, if the eligible date is 10/31 for the free and reduced price meal, the date used should be census. Well, the date used should be when the record was collected. It's just the noting that it'll still work for the supplemental concentration grant funding. It's definitely LCFF specific, but if it was earlier, if they collected that date prior to census day, that will have an impact on Title I counts for schools in the CONAP and what they call rank and serve, where they determine how to allocate the funding to the different schools. There's some other areas in which it is a factor. But I think there's a tendency like, because the collection, we can collect up until the October 31st date. That's all that matters. Just note that it won't count for some other purposes outside LCFF. That's an exception that's made for LCFF. Last thing, if you weren't at the trainings, the CSIS YouTube channel has the playlist up. I need to go through these because they're new, updated this year, and the links to the Fall 1 reporting and certification, as well as the Fall 1 advanced reporting certification. I'm not that advanced yet. It's 10 o'clock though, and I know Power School was joining, and there's a link. Did you already drop that in the chat, Karina? Or could you for me? Okay. For those of you who are ARIES folks or any other student information system, we continue to invite everybody to our meetings, and ARIES is usually always here. And I think Equitas has expressed interest in joining. We can't get everybody, but we do our best. And please, this is most important, your feedback. Take a minute, either drop in the chat. There's if you could drop in the chat, Karina, the QR code, the tiny URL, or use the QR code. Fill this out. We would love to have your feedback, and especially anything you have for upcoming meetings. Would love to know what you'd like to talk about, what you'd like to hear about. I have queued up some folks from our foster youth services program who work with foster youth liaisons to make sure foster youth data is accurate and it's it's as up to date as possible. But anything else you might want to hear about, I'd love to know and get some guest appearances on here. And we'll have Sean here next time. I already nailed Sean Walker down from CDE to be at our next meeting. And anything else, maybe some assessment folks could join us. But please fill this out for us, and I'll just leave that up here. And if you're going on about your day, take some deep breaths. It's an exciting day. A lot going on today, and I appreciate everybody being here. You are a vital part of the work that schools do. So thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And hopefully I'll see you in December at our December meeting. If I don't recognize you when you walk up, make sure you remind me who you are and where you're from. I would love to see you in person if you're attending our upcoming December meeting, or sign up for the spring meeting in April, and keep doing the hard work.